Okay, well, welcome back. This is the second part, but possibly going to be the first one. I don't even know if I'll publish the other one. There was too much inconsistencies happening with it. This is the one from Mr. Wolfoe1080.
You can see the effect of changing the exposure level in the camera.
Wanking on about changing exposure level, how it does change the size of the sun flare. So I suggest you'll need to look at his video. I'm not linking to it. You can look him up. He goes by the name Wolfoe1080. This one was published on the June 30th, 2018, called Broom Sunset Confirms Why Size Analysis Without a Solar Filter is Pointless. And I'm just going to pause it there so we don't have too much background noise. I'm a little bit annoyed at the moment. Since I've been harassed while trying to make videos about a water bill, can you believe it? Every time. Anyway, it's besides the point. I'm not going to talk about that. Here he is going on about putting a filter on the camera to capture the sunset. Something I've actually politely spoken to him before in the past about. And once again, this comment must have been blocked from general view. I don't know whether he can see it or not, but he's obviously denying its existence because he's not responded to it at all, where at least previously he used to respond to some of my comments, which for the most part were generally polite, reasonable, treating him like a fellow human being, as I generally give everybody the benefit of the doubt for, at first at least. So this one, I would just like to read out my comment first, the one that nobody else has seen, no thumbs up or down. I mean, I can tell you, as I said before on the other one, I get minimum 10 to 12 thumbs down within, 10, 20 minutes. It'll be immediately thumbed down by at least 3 or 4 and some other sort of comment. So he's obviously blocked me. I don't know how you do that on YouTube. I don't know why you would. Why would you produce videos which you specifically make towards a certain sector of people, flat earthers, and then go and block them from responding? Either you're a coward, or as I've explained in the other one, you can see that for yourself, because I'm going to publish that first. This can be part 2, even though technically we're going chronologically backwards, which I might just mention that as a brief little tidbit for most of you who've never even thought about this before. Why not? Because I like dropping little interesting bits of factual information, because it shows I'm more than just a flat earther. I'm a thinker who understands things probably beyond what the average human being understands until I describe it, of course, and I give away this knowledge freely. So I'm going to give this one freely. So it came to me because I'm responding to this in chronologically backwards order. Like as I said, this one's back from the 30th of June. The other few I've been going back one at a time, anti-chronologically ordered. This is actually how we as human beings learn how to speak, especially as infants. You might have seen that Simpsons episode where Homer has a long lost brother who comes along and invents a device that translates what a baby is saying into the words so that the mother can understand it. It was actually a really simple device. I don't tell you this on the show, but I worked this out for myself long ago. You've probably heard of the phenomenon called reverse speech, where they say a lot of subliminal messages are imprinted on the back of music, for example, so that when it's played backwards, especially in the days of vinyl, there's a reverse message there. And some people even use this as a type of forensics, where they will listen to a speech, generally a famous person, and play it backwards and look for clues as to what is really being said. Now, this is relevant to my takedown of Wolfoe, but I'm mentioning this simply because this is actually how babies learn to talk. What we all did, is we remember the most recent thing that we've come to in our consciousness, which is the last thing we heard, and we actually play it in our mind backwards. So when a baby starts trying to talk, saying, googly gargly type of language, it is actually speaking backwards. So if you recorded it as Homer's long lost brother did, somehow he picked up on this, maybe he time travelled and saw this video and went back and put in The Simpsons, because I do think a lot of time travel shit does go on. It's actually one of my most favourite topics of all time. So we are all basically time travellers. We're moving chronologically, 1 second to the next, to the next, to the next. But when we're living in the moment, as a baby is doing, we're remembering the very last thing we heard, and we're remembering it backwards. So we're trying to speak. So if you record a baby's, especially one that hasn't been vaccinated the crap out of them and they've still got some coherency, as all my 3 children did. They were all brilliant, brilliant children, and still are to this day. Brilliant young human beings. If you record it and play it backwards, as Homer's long lost brother obviously did, he just had a basic tape recorder which was able to record what the baby said, and then just played it backwards, and then the mother can interpret what the baby said and knows exactly what it's trying to say. And it was like a genius invention from a most simple concept. So it was nothing translating in it whatsoever. It was just normal tape recording played backwards. I just thought I'd mention that because I'm doing this in reverse chronological order, and I thought you might be interested to know that. Because, as I said, there's far more things that interest me more than just arguing flat earth things. But if people are still arguing against the flat earth, which is the obvious truth, with lies, dishonesty, thinking they've got the latest, greatest technological equipment to be able to prove their religious belief in this sun worship ideal, then that's what I'm out to expose. And I think eventually people are going to look back at this and say, fucking hell, Wolfie, you got shown by that bloody ignorant hippie flat earther living near Byron Bay. He told you, he was way smarter than you. He might not have had your money or your equipment, but he had the up here to be able to tell you and expose you. And that is all I intend to do, in a nice way. Hopefully we'll be able to sit down and have a beer one day and discuss it, though I doubt you're even capable of that. Anyway, I need to refresh my breath, and then I'm going to read my comment. Nice job, Wolfie. Must have been a few days back, because the moon is already 2 days past full, meaning it won't be rising for a couple of hours after sunset now. I think you confirmed exactly. So yeah, he's actually delayed publishing this by a few days, because I'm constantly aware of what the moon's doing. And it's coming up to I don't know if it's today. I will go and check my moon calendar, because I don't follow it that closely. I just follow my personal observations. But I think we've got a partial eclipse coming up. I think you confirmed exactly what I, as a confirmed flat earther, would expect to see on a Western Ocean horizon. So he's in Broome, Western Australia, and I've long been wanting to personally go over there so I could film a sunset myself, because that's where I believe the sun will vanish to a point, because there's no land to obscure it. I've lived my whole life here on the east coast, and we have the Great Dividing Range towards our west. So even from where I live at a pretty good elevation, there's always mountains off to the west blocking the sunset much more quickly than it would if you're able to view it over the flat ocean of a west coast. So here he is with an opportunity. I wouldn't die for it. I would really appreciate being able to do, and here he is doing it and still somehow using it to confirm we're on a globe. So I thank him for being that I, as a confirmed flat earther, would expect to see on the Western Ocean horizon. I live in the east, so I never get to see that perspective. I can assure you that sunset much slower than it does here, and it certainly showed some indications of getting much smaller. I hope next time, rather than keeping the P900 on an automatic tracker, you use it for what it is designed for, to zoom in on the sun. LOL. So he used it with one of his $2,500 trackers, an equatorial mount that automatically adjusts for the spin of the earth, as they're programmed to do. according to the calculations they're programmed with, not because it's actually mechanically following any curvature or spin of the Earth. It's just doing what it's told to do. And so he's showing it dipping down, whereas my whole attitude was, well, you've got a fairly good vantage point of the horizon here. Why not zoom in on the sun, especially since you're using a solar filter, and actually see if it is indeed setting, or if it is in fact getting further and further away. But instead, because he's just got on a tracker without zooming, the tracker is going down and down, so the horizon goes up and up until he fills the screen with nothing but the darkness of the ocean. It's like, what a shame, what a wasted opportunity. Previously, I've asked him to do a similar thing from up in his plane, where he has claimed he's at a 45,000 feet height, and he's taken pictures of the sun without a solar filter, so all you get is the glare, and he claims, quite erroneously, quite falsely, quite deliberately, dishonestly, yes, Wolfie, I'm calling you a liar and a charlatan, where you've taken pictures and you said, look, here is the sun setting from this height, which it would never do over the flat Earth. So it says, yes, use a solar filter, zoom in on it, show us the sun actually setting from 45,000 feet height. I imagine it will eventually. I do, because I think you have to be as high as the moon or close to it before the sun never sets at all, because the moon itself proves it is always high enough to capture sunlight, which would again be impossible. Well, no, it wouldn't be impossible. It makes sense on the globe Earth. A lot of stuff makes sense on the globe Earth, except for the speeds and the vacuum part, and the water. In fact, water is never curved, but always level. A lot of things don't make sense on the globe Earth, but at least we can say, okay, well, the moon appearing to come up because of our axial rotation and being high enough for the sun to shine on it. That is why we get the moon phases. Over the flat Earth, as I've long said, you're looking at a moon and sun. I don't know exactly what relationship their actual heights are that we're able to see. I somehow think the moon is actually higher than the sun, but I have no proof of it. I can't prove it one way or the next. But what I can say is when you get sufficiently high as the moon is, and it's still following its more or less parallel trajectory above us as the sun does, that it will always be high enough to capture sunlight. And the atmosphere in between us and the moon, meanwhile, is sufficient to drown out the sunlight as the sun gets far enough away. Hence why when it does, we get the twilight and eventually dark enough for the stars to come out, especially if the moon itself isn't too bright. So when he's up at this 45,000 feet height, zooming in on a sun and claiming it sets, and yet this is, I think, when he blocked me, so it's not that long back. I'll see if I can find that one too, if there's enough time in this video. He claims that you were seeing the sunset, and then when I questioned him on it, he said, well, at least it's partial sunset. And I think that was when it starts to sink in with him. Oh, he is his own worst enemy. He's disproving his own theories with his own videos, his own technology that he's trying to use to grasp onto this thing that says, we live on a ball. Don't you dare take my ball away, because if you do, I'm going to have to admit I'm wrong. Now, it's not that big a thing to admit you're wrong. I've been wrong before. I can't remember when, but it happened once, I think. We can all admit to when we're wrong, when we're shown we're wrong. This is the trouble when you get this big ego like people like Wolfie. See, their ego is centered not just around the fact they have to be right, but the fact that they are so damn sure about their position that they cannot be wrong, that they can spend thousands and thousands of dollars on equipment that they don't really need, that, you know, let's not even go into what he could be spending it on. It's his money to do with as he pleases. I have no problem with that. So why not use this equipment from the 45,000 feet height with your solar filter and zoom in on the sun setting and show us a sun setting? But no, you have to go right down to the first sand dune at Broome, at this particular beach here, I think you even mentioned it. Doesn't really matter. It's a beach on the west coast to try and show what you cannot prove any other place because you're too high. The sun won't set from there, but you can do it from down here. So yeah, I requested him to zoom in on it instead. That's what the P900 is for, is to zoom in to magnify the view and see what's actually happening to it. But instead, no, he puts on his equatorial mount so it can dip down and miss the true view that we're looking for. So as I said, next, you let the flat earth team down here and could have proven us wrong. Clearly though, there was a lot of chemtrail haze in the sky. They've been hammering the east coast lately too. Yesterday was disgusting and the sun hasn't shone all day today. But as expected, as I've been saying all along, every time I look into infinity from Cape Byron, there are always clouds on the horizon, even if it's only chem haze. Whatever atmospheric obstruction there is, the sun will 99.9% of the time be obscured by that before we get to see it disappear into a tiny pinprick point of light. Had you actually zoomed in, we could have seen that happen. So I do hope you find a clear day soon to try and disprove this fact. Do it with an open mind. Keep the solar filter on too, please. Nice flat horizon too, with no land to the left or right. Why don't we see any curvature? If 1 degree equals 70 miles and 1 mile of drop occurs at a 90-mile distance, surely some amount of curvature should be visible. 1 degree is actually huge on a 25,000 mile round ball. So he's deliberately avoiding doing the hard experiments which would confirm the flat earth belief that the sun gets into a tiny, tiny pinprick if you look at it and zoom in on it as it disappears over the western ocean horizon. Hard to see over land because the land will always obscure it by simple fact that that's just what land does. It will block light. I don't know how many times I've used this as an argument in other discussions. In fact, I'm going to pause this and find a completely unrelated discussion, which is related I should say, but completely unrelated to this Wolfoe1080 thief and liar, and it will confirm what I'm trying to say here. Be right back. Alright, well this one is probably one which is deserving of its own complete video. Well, I can devote the entire 30 minutes specifically to this one. This one is by a guy called Greater Sapien. Much respect to you, dude. You seem almost intelligent anyway. This one he called 11 Questions Flat Earthers Are Afraid to Answer. How do I realise this one existed earlier? I would have responded to it much earlier. But this one was published on May 20th, 2017. So as I say, I wish I'd have known. I've subscribed to him now so I get updates, because a lot of these people who think they have some sort of intellect, they like to attack flat earth for some reason, which, good. I'd rather discuss it with people who do it intellectually and somewhat heated, but at least generally politely. You know, we can put each other down a little bit. So this one I think does deserve its own video altogether, and I can go through all 11 of them individually, but there was one called number 5, which one guy, Federico Gianna, responded to, and it's to do with the moon. Once again, this is possibly one of my favourite topics of the flat earth, at least, is understanding the moon and its perspective. Oh geez, I really should do a whole new video. It's how about I just go back to my final response to him today and I'll just read it out, because most everything is in some sort of context because I quoted him, and it's to do with, he presented a diagram showing why people from certain different places of Earth looking up at the same moon, how he assumes we should all be seeing a different side of the moon. So let me explain to you why that isn't so. Frederico, I appreciate your response and the fact that English isn't your native language, so I'll bear that in mind while I destroy your inability to understand perspective as it applies to things of very great height. First of all, let me assist you briefly. We watch a movie, we see a picture. So where you said, I'd appreciate your efforts to watch it, but evidently you didn't, you presented just a diagram. As I say, I was being a bit nasty saying that, but it's good to point out people's errors in English if they're trying to learn. I'd just like to point out that while I understand your English, it would do your efforts a greater service to use the correct terminology if indeed you're going to be so bold as to outright call me a liar. The truth is your image was actually still open in a tab until just moments ago as I scrolled through closing them down and discovered your response here, which this one I've written 2 hours ago, his was 20 hours ago. So as you can see, I've only just discovered his response in the last 2 to 3 hours. And I still had his picture open and I was looking at it again just to see exactly where he was wrong. I evidently did look at your image and immediately saw where you were mistaken, because you have no concept of the scale of the image, something which nearly every one of us actually lacks when it comes to drawing 2D diagrams expressing an idea. We think we know what we're talking about. You actually have to view it from the eye of each perceiver, not from a third person point of view imagining what each is viewing from a great distance. And this is one thing I come across very regularly in globe earth believers when they think they can make a diagram to show perspective. They show a 2D image of a little person standing here and then the house or whatever they're showing getting further away over here, and then they're drawing in all these perspective lines. Not once are they taking into account the amount of shrinkage of angular resolution from the viewer's point of view. They're taking it completely from this third person point of view, looking at both. It's a bit hard to describe in just diagrams alone, so bear with me as I go through this one. His quote here, once watched, my diagram shows quite precisely that your position is untenable. Neither Annika nor Bob would see the underside of the moon, and they'd even see different faces. And this is without raising the issue that the three observers would see the moon having different apparent sizes, since it would be at wildly different distances from all three. So again, I ask you, if you wish to see the diagram, he's left a link in the comments. I'll see if I can open it up, why not? Give me a second here. Opening up Federico Gianni. Let's see if this shows. So I hate moving the camera because then I can't see what you're seeing. And it's on a tripod thing at the moment. So here's his moon. Here is Charles. There's Bob. There's Annika. Looking up from Sweden to the moon. Charles up to the moon. Bob up to the moon, and you'll still see that their field of view is still going to be the bottom side. This is just, hopefully that showed up, I can't tell. This is what happens when you're using a selfie view. You can't see the viewfinder when you're pointing at something else. So, reading back through his comment again, so you have a bit of a rough idea where these people are seeing it from. Since it's at wildly different distances from all three. Now, this is where I prove it is not wildly. And this, my friend, is where your lack of understanding of perspective comes into play. You are probably aware of distance shrinkage, where an object appears to get smaller and smaller until in many cases it even vanishes before reaching the horizon. What you will notice, for example, is how a massive cargo ship will appear as a tiny wee grain of rice sitting on the horizon, if you are fortunate enough to live somewhere with clear skies and unlimited ocean views. You may now view this ship moving from one end of the visible horizon to the other, moving very slowly, and although it moves perhaps 100 or 200 miles, depending on your vantage point, it neither gets larger nor smaller. You might say it has reached the limits of its shrinking point over such a distance that its size becomes fixed. That should address your final concern about why the moon never appears to shrink or expand, as its total distance is already so great that the minuscule distance that can be detected between observers is insufficient to cause any distinct change in appearance of size. The fact you conclude they would all see different faces is your lack of appreciation of the scale involved. You mention it again, so I'll leave it for your later comments rather than repeat myself. Quoting Federico, as I showed you, not everyone on Earth would be under your aeroplane moon, because I mentioned the example of an aeroplane as well, why we always see the undercarriage as it passes over it. Bear that in mind because it becomes relevant again. Yes, they would. By the time something is as high up as the moon, it would be impossible to see so much as a tiny peak up around the side. Federico, I live in a region with heavy aeroplane traffic. If the aeroplanes pass directly over me, I see the underside. Okay, but when the aeroplane flies far enough, I see only the side. This is something I see daily. Far aeroplanes are seen on the side and not from the underside, so the angle I view it from does not matter. In this very moment, a hot air balloon is lazily floating in the sky. I don't see its bottom, but its side, exactly like the fleur for moon for Annika and Bob. My response. See, this is once again where you are not grasping scale. The aeroplane, especially in high density traffic, indicates you are very likely near to an airport. Where I live, not so much, and the vast majority of the planes I see already at cruising altitude, especially at night or in the evening. They also tend to follow a fixed north-south route here along the east coast in Australia, at least 90% heading north. This is actually a much more detailed topic in itself than I care to elaborate upon right now, but the point is, they're all still but a fraction of the height of the moon. So I just googled average cruising altitude of flights. Private jets typically take the higher end, cruising around 41,000 feet, so they can take the most direct route above all the commercial air traffic. Light aircraft typically stick close to 10,000 feet, so let's assume then about 35,000 feet is normal cruising altitude for most planes. Let's say the moon is 200 miles up. This is the equivalent of 1,056,000 feet, at least 30 times higher than the average plane. Putting this into height perspective is next to impossible for the human mind to imagine. Only the highest of planes, spy planes, completely invisible to our view from the ground, fly at approximately twice that height. So now you're beginning to understand. Double that again is 4 times the height. Double that again is 8 times the height. Double that again and again. And now you are beginning to understand why it is only possible to ever see the underside of a spherical object at that height. And that is assuming it's merely 200 miles away, not 2,000, and certainly not 240,000 miles away. So for you to compare it with a hot air balloon, I see them frequently around here too. You should go and see some of the local footage I've published on my channel. It's extremely helpful. It's an extremely beautiful and picturesque region, and the hot air balloonists must go very early in the morning before the air gets too warm, even in winter. It's sheerly absurd, since they generally go barely above the treetops and fly in the range between 1,000 and 3,000 feet. Of course you would expect to see them side on, and the angular view only changes they are directly above you. I actually have some brief footage I might publish on my channel too, just so the average person can see how even a nearby balloon will set bottom first as it is obscured by nearby trees or buildings, once again without shrinkage. And I actually have some video footage I might try and upload soon too. I'll try and rush this last bit in before I run out of time. Your final point. Aside then, honestly, 500 kilometres isn't something I've problems to grasp, differently from 384,000 kilometres. This is why drawing a diagram helps showing what we would see if the moon was ludicrously close and ludicrously tiny as you claim. I continue on. Is, I assume, already sufficiently addressed here. At no point have I claimed a ludicrously close or tiny moon. My 200-mile estimate, I know we use kilometres here in Australia too, but since most of these discussions revolve around the American use of the old-fashioned mile, I tend to think in terms of them too, would be closer to about 300 miles, making it 1 entire third higher again. So I seriously do think you, understandably, have problems grasping such a height when you're comparing it to something, let's see, 1.6 million feet to something 1,000 feet. Big problem, matey. Or 500,000 meters compared to 333 meters. So he's using the hot air balloon as some example, whereas I did try and use aeroplanes at least to give him the advantage of being 35,000 feet, but even so, 35,000 feet to 1,050,000, well actually it turns out to be 1.5 million feet if we're going to go up 300 miles. Again, it's even further again than that, but we're talking ratios that the human mind generally cannot grasp, even for something only 200 or 300 miles above us. If we can't grasp that, what hope have we got of trying to understand the flat earth from your global position of thinking everything is hundreds of thousands of miles away, millions of miles away, and everything fits in to the point where the earth we're on, which is obviously flat and still with level water, must be going through it all at some 2.8 million miles an hour. We cannot grasp such ridiculous speeds, and that is why it is also easily brushed over our heads, because we cannot possibly understand such phenomenal things if we can't even understand a 200-mile difference compared to a 333 feet difference, and somehow think they're the same thing. Come on, mate. Anyway, out of time again. I didn't really come to do what I intended to do, which was to smash Wolfoe, but I hope at least it comes to his attention that I'm onto him, and I won't put up with his bullshit about being censored. That is just wrong, and if you're going to be dishonest and decrepit about it, I will expose you, and I'll continue to expose you, and I will find a way of doing it more solidly, bit by bit, through each and every one of your videos you address to flat earthers that you refuse to let me respond to. See ya.